every human behavior we have is belief driven. Behind every action we take every single day or every lack of action, all there really is just sitting a belief. And oftentimes in life, people, whether it's with a business, whether it's with fitness, whether it's with so many different things, so many times in life, people know exactly what they need to do to, let's say, succeed in business, but oftentimes they don't do what they know. And the reason is because there's these underlying unconscious currents that are actually dictating why people do what they do. And those are called our beliefs. And so to kind of circle that all together, the biggest thing I believe I've learned and implemented is you shift your beliefs, you shift your life. And if you can figure out what some of those beliefs are that are holding you back in your business, if you can find out what some of those beliefs are that are holding you back in your health, in your relationship, in whatever area of your life, if you can bring those to the forefront and then shift those, the entire quality of your life can change massively.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Stu Massengill, who shares how to get out of your shell and thrive. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and bring balance to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. While you're there, you can sign up for a monthly email where I share the best articles I read this month, let you know about upcoming episodes, and share a little wisdom. You can also listen to coaching calls under the Coaching Calls tab. I also share the most interesting articles I read every week on Facebook at facebook.com/Richer Soul. And there's also a Facebook group where you can ask questions and interact with other listeners. Today's quote comes from Steve Jobs. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking. Don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know it when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking until you find it. Don't settle. It took me until my 50s to figure this out, and it's amazing. I have fun, and I work more hours than I have since my early 20s. But it's not work. It's fun. I get bored when I just sit around and do nothing. What do you love to do? That's the theme for today. It's not waiting to be happy, but finding what you love and pivoting to that. It's not always easy, and it may take time, but over time, you will have success. Let's review last week's action step. Did you try one of Hale's ways of letting go? Remember what he said? Don't force it, but occasionally remember that feelings are just feelings and you can let them go. Try to ask yourself, could I let it go? Would I let it go? And when? Too often we hold on for a lifetime. Why not just let go? I'm excited about the spring and life opening back up. It's been a long winter, and I'm excited to get back to a new normal. It's time to do some mulching and see about some new flowers for outside. I hope the deer and rabbits don't devour everything again. Just finished my 12-week year plan and reviewing the previous quarter. Looking forward to a new sprint with the theme on creating better mental models. I have some courses and books lined up, along with the rest of my goals. I have a question. Do you view life as it happening to you or for you? It's a slight difference, but it makes a world of difference. It's one of the few things Tony Robbins says. And today, we have a guest who worked with him. Stu Massengill is on a mission to change the statistics from 80% of people not loving what they do to 80% of people falling in love with what they do. He's a peak performance strategist for Tony Robbins and the founder of Finding Direction. Through his podcast and university, he helps people go from lost in life to creating a life full of passion and fulfillment. As a high achiever under 30, Stu has accomplished many things, from building an 8-figure business at 20 years old to beating cancer at 24 years old. Stu brings his passion and heart to creating a lasting impact across the globe. Let's meet our guest. Welcome to Richer Soul, Stu Massengill. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It's an absolute honor. So thanks for having me today.
And I'm excited to learn from you today. We always start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Yeah, so I grew up in a really, and I feel blessed for how I grew up. I have 2 great parents, an older brother, and financially they did well. Not like super well, but we were, I'd say, higher middle class. And it's interesting because throughout my childhood, I always had such an easy relationship with money. I didn't grow up having parents that had the conversation of, we don't have the money for this, or bad people have money. Like, those conversations never happened. My parents were somewhat frugal. It wasn't like, oh, let's go on this crazy vacation. Let's go spend money doing this thing and that. So they were a bit frugal, but the conversations never came up that money was an issue or anything like that. And it's interesting because throughout my life up to today, that belief is massively instilled in me, where I never feel like I have a poor relationship with money. And something that's interesting that I heard through a friend, and this is, I think, true, is someone once told me, they're like, imagine you had a best friend and you were just like, oh, I hate this person. They're not good to me. They're awful. That person's not going to want to hang around you because of the way that you act about them. And many people take on that same relationship with money, where they go, oh, I hate money, or not that they hate money, but there's a lot of negative energy around money. So money obviously doesn't want to hang out around them because of that. And so I think because I grew up with this relationship with money in the regards of everything's going to work out, the money's going to not be an issue, that's allowed me to have a good relationship with money, and that's allowed money to flow to me.
And you were quite lucky. It sounds like your parents had a good, healthy relationship with money, and so they passed that on to you. It doesn't sound like they had any kind of negatives. It's not the story we normally hear. Usually it's the opposite.
Yeah. I was blessed that my parents had a healthy relationship with money, also had a healthy relationship with themselves. I don't think I've ever seen my parents argue in front of me. So I think whether those were there or not, I think one of the beautiful gifts they've given me is that they didn't have those conversations in front of me so that I wouldn't build the type of beliefs around negatively associating a relationship with money or with relationships, because they just didn't put those around me. So those never went into my head.
Do you know if that was intentional on their part, or it was just the way they were?
I think it might be somewhat intentional, and also a little bit of how they were. My mom's a life coach, and she grew up teaching us just positive affirmations. You can do this. If you're not going to say anything nice, don't say anything at all, that kind of stuff. So I'm sure there was some intentionality behind it, but I do think there was a bit of grace in there as well that they didn't do that.
What's it like to grow up with a mom who's a life coach? Is she constantly like almost coaching you? Because I know with my kids, I do that.
Yeah, it was beautiful. Just always having someone that was rooting for you in a positive way. And we hear these stories where sometimes a parent will say, they're putting their kids down, and it's so crazy the impact that can have on people. And I think I was very fortunate to have someone that constantly reinforced these positive things into me. And one thing that's actually interesting is because I grew up with a mom as a life coach, and eventually I got into the coaching business, I started to realize the power of how truly impressionable you are at a young age. There's a statistic, it says 50% of your patterns as a human, they're formed by the time you're 5 years old. And so when I was learning some of these things, I had two younger cousins that were born, and I was probably young 20s at the time when they were born. And I would always tell them before they could walk, before they could talk, just, hey, anything's possible. Anything's possible. I would just always say it to them. And now a decade later, every single time I see them, they run up to me and they go, hey, Stu, anything's possible. And so I just think it's so crazy the serious impressions that we have on kids when they're young, and just being extraordinarily conscious about that is huge, whether that's, again, in relationship to money or anything else.
And essentially, it's true. And there's an old Chinese proverb, show me the boy of 7 and I will show you the man. And I think kids and the way they learn the first 6, 7 years, it's that basic programming of what life is. And the next 6 or so years is all the mindset programming. And unfortunately, a lot of parents don't realize that even being nice to your kids in certain ways can cause you to stifle them. So even praising your kids, depending on how you praise them, can have the alternate results. It can make them fearful to want to try because they're afraid if they try and fail that they won't be loved. So did your mom kind of balance that as well?
Yeah, she did. I would say she had a really good balance of all the different elements for sure.
And that's cool. So clearly you grew up and you had some early success, didn't you?
Yeah. When I was, 19 years old, I always grew up as the kid that was diving into entrepreneurship. Sold candy in high school, sold skateboards in high school, ran a little business in my neighborhood in middle school. And when I got to college, I was working on starting up a skateboard company with a friend. And long story short, one day he called me. He said, Stu, F this. We're not doing that anymore. I found something else. This is what we're doing. And he ended up introducing me to a network marketing company. And when I got introduced to that, it was basically I think the biggest thing I took from it was all of the unconscious programming I got when I was young with positive messages and positive reinforcements. When I was introduced to that business, it was bringing that to a more conscious level of what you think about becomes. And when I got into this business for the next 4 years, I just became massively obsessed with the personal development industry, learning from people like Bob Proctor, Tony Robbins, Darren Hardy, all these different people. And ultimately, throughout that 4 years, we built a business and it did about $8 million in revenue. And I think one of the biggest things from that was, and it's a cliche saying they say sometimes, but they say, we don't set goals to reach the goal. We set the goal for the growth that we achieve in that process, for who you have to become to grow to ultimately reach that goal. That's what we set goals for. We don't set it to actually achieve the goal.
Interesting. I haven't heard it stated that way, but it's true. Like you have to become that person, and that's part of human growth that allows you to get there. Yeah.
And I think it's interesting. Like one of the biggest things I was blessed with going through that opportunity in my young 20s is there's this ideology that a lot of people have, and I had it, where it's once I get here, then I'm going to be happy. Or once I'm here, then my dad's going to finally love me. Or once I'm here, then I'm going to be proud. And most of the time what happens is people get to that quote unquote here. And there's this sense of this is it. Like this, okay, I don't feel this magic fairy dust that's supposed to be sprinkled on me. And the reality is that when you get to this quote unquote here place, you want to start to understand that the person that ultimately determines at that point that you're going to be happy, that you're going to be proud, that your dad's going to love you, or whatever it is, the person that ultimately decides that at that moment is you. And rather than trying to say, oh, let me achieve this so that I can be happy, there's, again, another cliche saying, it says, rather than achieve to be happy, happily achieve. And so I think through learning that at a young age, that was one of the biggest experiences that shaped my life, because now as I've pursued my life, my career, my profession, a lot of it's been focused on how can I have a fulfilled and passionate life rather than doing something just to make the money or just to get the title or just to create a quote unquote status for myself.
And it's awesome that you learned that lesson, because I think too many people all think I'm going to be happy when, and that is a common theme. And the reality is, if you're not happy now, you're not going to be happy then. Money only magnifies your behaviors. It doesn't really change them.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
So what happened with the business?
So I was in the business for just under 4 years. I was with this network marketing company, and I had to make one of the harder decisions of my life, where I was with this company for a long time. I really enjoyed what they did. And I kind of came to this point where I'm a big believer in following my heart. And I just came to this internal place of feeling like I wasn't supposed to be doing this anymore, and that I was supposed to move on to something next. And it was a difficult process, definitely easier said than done. But ultimately, after probably 6 months of going back and forth in my head, I ultimately decided to move on from that and to just figure out whatever that next step was going to be, which a lesson I've learned now is have somewhat of a plan before you leave rather than just leaving, because I left. And that's probably when once I left, I went into one of the more painful parts of my journey so far, which was just feeling lost and stuck and not sure what I wanted to do with my life, and going from this place of I love what I do every day to what's my purpose and why am I here? And going through that process was not the most pleasant.
It's not. And I tell people, because a lot of people think you just have to quit what you're doing and start something new or have time to go figure it out. But you can essentially build your new life on the side and test things out while that whole process is going on. And that gives you the ability to pivot without being as struggling and being as stuck. So that, to me, creating the side gig is the ultimate way to do that. Little by little, testing the markets, seeing if your ideas work, and then over time, pivoting out when you see that something is built. Takes a lot less of the financial stress, too.
Yeah, exactly. And it just allows you to give yourself really an outlet to do something that you enjoy. You know, I think a lot of times people get caught up in doing something that it's a profitable business, or it's something that can make money, or it's something in that sense, but maybe not something they're truly excited about. And if you can focus on your main thing and then on the side do something that lights you up, that gets you going, it's just going to bring more joy into your life. And ultimately, the things that bring you more joy into your life, ultimately you'll put more time into, and therefore that can grow into obviously a successful business.
So how did you figure out your purpose?
That's a good question. So I went through, I would say it was probably a four or 5 year kind of journey in that space of what am I supposed to do? What's going on? Why am I here? And to save a long story short, first place I went is I said, I want to be back in action sports. I grew up skating, snowboarding. My buddy and I tried to start an action sports company at one point. Let me just go back to that because I know I love that. And so I decided that to fully immerse into this action sports world, I was going to go live in the action sports capital of the world, which was New Zealand. And I was going to go there for 7 months and really just taste the culture, experience it, see what elements of action sports I truly loved and what parts I maybe didn't like as much. And so I booked a one-way flight to New Zealand, got there, and long story short, 2 days into my trip, basically noticed there wasn't something correct with my body. Went to the doctors in New Zealand and for 2 days did, basically tests all day long. And at the end of the 2 days, classic movie scene, sit me down in the office room or whatever. And they sit me down. They go, sir, we have found a mass in your body. We think it's either benign, meaning it's nothing, or it could be cancerous, but we suggest you get on the next flight home and basically go see your doctor. And long story short, it ended up being testicular cancer. All I would say is for all of my guys listening to this to just be vulnerable. Basically, one of my soldiers just swole up to the size of an egg, which obviously is not normal. And so if that happens, I would just say, go get checked out. Or even if that hasn't happened, go get just regular checkups from your doctor. I was able to catch it early enough where in a matter of 6 months, we were able to get rid of the cancer, which was awesome. I had a couple different surgeries and went through some processes, but got rid of that. And then basically went back to action sports. I said, okay, now I'm done with the cancer. Let me go back to action sports, and worked in that space for a little bit. I worked for Vans, the company, and ultimately had this realization that I love doing action sports, but that's not what I'm called to do on this planet. I'll go snowboard, I'll go skateboard, but what I'm meant to do is help people. And that's the realization I had. And basically that's what brought me to where I am today, which is doing stuff with Tony Robbins and then also being the founder of Finding Direction.
So out of curiosity, when you went through cancer, that must not have been easy because especially at the beginning, you don't know what the outcomes are. Were there lessons that you took away from that?
Yeah, so I am a ridiculously positive person. I believe everything happens for a reason. It happens for the right reason at the right time. And so when I was initially told that it was cancer, I flew home and basically was just like, all right, this is supposed to happen to me. And I just accepted it. And I personally know that I'm not done on this earth with what I'm supposed to be doing. And I just knew it was going to be part of my story. And this was something I was going to have to go through. And ultimately one day it would serve a greater purpose. But I would say one of the biggest lessons that I got from it was the day I was diagnosed technically with testicular cancer, right? When the doctor told us, I was in the room with my parents, and the moment the doctor said it, you can see in my parents' eyes and their body language and their tonality and their skin color, a moment of, holy crap, my son has cancer. And I can't imagine what that would be like to be a parent hearing your son has cancer or your daughter has cancer. I can't even imagine it. But as soon as we came out of the office room, I told my parents, I said, hey, this is part of my story. We're going to get through this, but don't treat me like I'm any differently. Don't talk to me like I'm any differently. Don't talk to me like I have something that can kill me, because if you plant that seed in me, that seed can grow and we don't want that seed to grow. So just know this is going to be part of my story. We're going to get through this as a family and it's going to be no big deal. And from that moment on, every single friend that was close to me, my sibling that was close to me, I told all of them that same exact thing. And throughout the process, it made it an easier process for me just because I didn't have a lot of people going, oh, are you going to die? Or I didn't have people crying around me because of this. I really was just able to instill this really positive belief in everyone around me that, hey, this is just part of Stu's story. This is part of his journey and he's going to get through this. He's going to get to the other side. And I think for me, that was personally one of the biggest things that I took away from that.
It's funny. It makes sense why you work with Tony, because Tony's always saying life is not happening to you. Life is happening for you. Exactly. And it sounds like you've got that same mentality in the way that you look out there. So what's it like to work with Tony Robbins?
That's a blast. I know you're familiar with Tony and his work, and the dude's heart is just, it's massive. I was first introduced to Tony about 8 years ago, and I went to one of his UPW Unleash the Power Within events, and it changed my entire life. And it had a massive impact on me and some of the beliefs I had about who I was and that I falsely created. I was able to shift those and really start to build the identity of who I wanted to be rather than who I was taught to be. And so fast forward, what would it be, 6 years later, about, a year and a half, 2 years ago, I started working with Tony. And I would say the most incredible thing that I've learned just from working from him is I've had a front row seat as he's pivoted in COVID. And you look at a company that goes from 10,000 people in a stadium as their main events to you can't have 100 people in a room. Overnight, your business crumbles. And to see that the way how he approached that and said, I will find a way. There's no way that I will not make this happen. I will serve people to the highest degree and I will not accept no. And to see just his determination there. And now we're doing events where they're virtually, one of our events we had over 20,000 people. Our next one, it's looking like we'll have 30, 40,000 people from all over the world. And it's just been beautiful to watch how he's pivoted through that and have a front row seat to watching it.
And that's what you have to do. You have to pivot. And I was shocked at how fast so many people pivoted back in last March, because literally overnight, my calendar went from full to empty as everything local shut down to literally within days, it was twice as full as it was before. And that pivot and the people who pivoted quickly, it was just like, wow, that was amazing how they just went for it. And so it was fun to be able to do that and to pivot in that way. And unfortunately, a lot of people sit there in shock, and it's a shame because you have to pivot. Life is going to constantly throw you curveballs. And if you sit around and wallow, you're going to get left behind. But if you pivot, you'll find a way through it. You just have to find people who are also in the same boat as you, who've got ideas, and you just start trying things. And so it's fun. And I know for Tony, it's got to be super difficult because he's the kind of guy who draws energy from the crowd. And to do that on Zoom is a whole different level of trying to do that.
Yeah, it's a different beast doing it. Obviously, people are in their home. There's distractions. There's all those things. But one of the parts of Tony pivoting is, again, going, I'm not going to accept this just being like a Zoom call that we're having. So he's done everything required to make this still be a 3.5-day event where they're doing 12 plus hours, and every single day is fully immersive. You're at your computer, but it really does feel the way they've built it. It feels like you're in a stadium with 20,000 other people. It's unbelievable.
And it probably does even better if you can project it onto an 80-inch TV.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the stadium they built is no joke.
Wow. Impressive.
Yeah.
So you talked about the fact that you had to make a change from the person you thought you were to the person you wanted to be. What was that?
Yeah, so I grew up, and part of my background a little deeper is I grew up as a younger sibling. And I had an older brother. We have a great relationship, but he was the social one, the extrovert, the outgoing one. And I always had this belief in my life that I was the shy one, the quiet, a little bit more introverted, and that I was just like in the shadows, more or less. And that was the identity I built growing up. Now, in order to be any successful person in business, you have to have pretty unbelievable people skills, right? You got to be good with humans because, in a sense, business is humans. And so when I started to get into business and I had gone to this Tony Robbins event, I had this massive realization that I have this identity that I'm this shy, quiet, introverted person, but that's just a story that I built about who I think I am. That's not actually the truth. And so I was able to reshape that and just really turning my life from being someone who felt like they were in the shadows to now knowing that I'm someone that I can stand out. I can do my thing. I can be in front. I can lead the charge. And that really ultimately was what made a massive shift in my business, was going from having this identity of being in the back to I'm taking this thing head on.
So how does someone go from shy and introverted to a great communicator and connector?
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of technical skills that you can build to make that change. But I would say one of the first initial steps is, again, just like the journey I had, is realizing that this is a set of stories you've built about yourself and it's not actually who you are. And what you'll see is if you really dig into this a little bit deeper, a lot of the times people become introverted because if you really go back into their childhood, maybe they had an experience at one point where they were talking, they were saying something, and let's say maybe a parent came up to them, they're 3 years old, they're blabbering their mouth off, the kid is, and the parent comes up and goes, shut up, you always are talking, just be quiet for a second. And maybe the parent was on a phone call and they just wanted you to stop talking for a second, but maybe from that moment when you were 3 years old, you took a belief that, wow, communication equals pain. That when I share my voice, it hurts. So I'm going to be a little quieter than a little bit more loud because that's what you were praised and punished for. And so it's going back, and it's sometimes some deep work you have to do, but you got to go back to those experiences and first build awareness around that. And then what I always coach a lot of my clients through is looking at, well, what other experience did you have in your life that you could pull from that maybe showed you that when you communicated, something beautiful happened. And if you can start to make that internal shift of communicating equals pain to communicating equals beautiful things, to maybe some beautiful relationships you've created in your life, maybe some beautiful moments you've had with a significant other, maybe you were on a sports team and you spoke up one time and you ended up winning because of something you said that pumped the team up. And if you can switch that internal belief of communication really does equal beautiful things, I would say that's really the first step from going from introvert to extrovert. And then there's a lot of technical skills as well that you can start to build that also make that process a little easier.
I think a lot of people get confused by this introvert extrovert. And I say that because to me, being introverted just means that you get your energy from quiet, whereas being extroverted to me means you get your energy from being with people. But it doesn't mean an introverted person can't communicate, or it doesn't mean you have to be shy.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great point, that introvert doesn't necessarily mean you're shy by any means, but it's been built into the culture. Right? If you're introverted, well, you're shy, you're quiet, you don't talk as much. And I think you make a great point there. That's not really at all what it means.
Yeah, I'm an introvert, so I know that. Like when COVID happened, the universe bent to my world, right? Yeah. I don't need to, it doesn't bother me that I'm not around a million people all day. I'm perfectly content living in my little space. But as you can see, clearly I'm on the airwaves, so I don't have a problem talking, meeting people, having conversations. But I know that if I go out somewhere, I need to come home and sit for an hour before I can go to bed, because I need that downtime, that quiet time. The recharge, yeah. It's just the way, whereas extroverts tend to recharge in those spaces. And I think with COVID, the extroverts are all freaking out because they're stuck in the alone space. Sure. So it makes it harder. So if someone is shy, what is the best way for them to start conversations?
Yeah, I would say one of the best tips someone ever gave me that changed my life is just learning to compliment people. People's favorite subject in the world, it's themselves. That's people's favorite word in the world is their name. And so whether you're trying to start a conversation with a guy or girl you have a crush on, whether you're trying to start a conversation with someone at a networking event that you could grow a business relationship with, whether you're starting a conversation with someone at the grocery store just because who knows what that conversation can lead to. An incredible way, in a simple way to start a conversation, I learned is just complimenting people, because and genuine being a key word, going up and saying, hey, I love that shirt that you have. Where did you get it? Or something like that. And what that'll do is that'll open up the conversation. And then one of the massive game changers for me was learning a simple building block of communication. And the building block, it's called FORM, and it's FORM. And all that stands for is from, occupation, recreation, and motivation. And what this is really is it's just a simple way to start conversations with people, where maybe you go up to someone and you go, oh, hey, I love that shirt. Where'd you get it? They start telling you, then boom, you go into form. You go, hey, where are you from? They start talking about it. Oh, occupation. What do you do for work? R, recreation. What do you do for fun? M, motivation. What are your dreams, goals, aspirations? And what that will really do is that honestly will allow you to have just genuine conversations. That's what took me from being in a place of going, what do people talk about for 5 minutes, let alone 30 minutes, let alone an hour? I couldn't fathom what people actually spoke about in a conversation, to now I could have a conversation for an hour just literally using this block of communication.
And the real secret to this is, if you're having that conversation with someone for an hour, you really shouldn't be speaking for more than 6 to 10 minutes.
Exactly.
If you let the other person speak for the majority of the time, you will be their new best friend, because nobody listens to anybody. And so the fact that you listen to them, it creates that relationship. These are those little surprising things in life that nobody talks about or shares. And when you learn those little secrets, everything becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best parts of being an introvert too, is when you get into conversations, introverts innately like to listen. Extroverts innately like to talk a little bit more. So by being an introvert, you're going to get in those conversations. You're going to ask people questions. You're going to let them talk about themselves, and you're going to sit there listening because that's what you like to do. And just by doing that, now these people are liking you more because, again, you're having them talk about their favorite thing in the world, which is themselves.
Very true. So you're a coach with Tony, correct?
Yes, correct.
So what have you learned as part of that process? And have you, what are the types of things that you've learned and implemented in your life?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that I've learned working with Tony is how truly controlling our beliefs are that we have in our life. Our beliefs are made up. Our beliefs, like what the true definition of a belief is, that a belief is a feeling of absolute certainty that you have about something. And I'll say it one more time. A belief is a feeling of absolute certainty that you have about something. And it doesn't necessarily mean that your beliefs are true. They're just beliefs of absolute certainty that you have about something. And what I've become to understand at the end of the day is that every human behavior we have is belief driven. Behind every action we take every single day or every lack of action, all there really is just sitting a belief. And oftentimes in life, people, whether it's with a business, whether it's with fitness, whether it's with so many different things, so many times in life, people know exactly what they need to do to, let's say, succeed in business. But oftentimes they don't do what they know. And the reason is because there's these underlying unconscious currents that are actually dictating why people do what they do. And those are called our beliefs. And so to kind of circle that all together, the biggest thing I believe I've learned and implemented is you shift your beliefs, you shift your life. And if you can figure out what some of those beliefs are that are holding you back in your business, if you can find out what some of those beliefs are that are holding you back in your health, in your relationship, in whatever area of your life, if you can bring those to the forefront and then shift those, the entire quality of your life can change massively.
That it can. So how do we shift our beliefs?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing when shifting your beliefs is you got to build leverage on yourself. And what I mean by that is if we have a belief, we have enough compelling reasons that support that belief, right? Whatever it is. But if you can start to build inverse reasons against that belief, that's when you can start to shift that. So for example, my life, one of my main beliefs was communication equals pain. If I go out and talk to people and have conversations, they're not going to listen to me. It's going to hurt. They're going to say, why did you say that's stupid? And I had all these reasons to support that I shouldn't communicate because it's going to equal pain. And so what I had to do is I had to start building leverage around what were beautiful conversations I had. What would my life look like if I had more conversations, right? Could that open up business doors? Could that open up relationship doors? Could that open up many different doors in my life? And eventually by stacking enough reasons on why this belief was a good thing in my life, and then looking at the other side of pain and saying, if I don't communicate, what's the pain that comes from this? And then building enough reasons on that, I had reasons why communication equaled beautiful things and pleasure towards communicating. And I had enough pain reasons that if I didn't communicate, it was going to equal pain. So that ultimately that pushed me in the forward trajectory of saying, I got to go communicate because that's the only way that I can create the life I want.
Can someone do this alone, or do you really need help?
Someone can do it alone. You can. I would say it's a more difficult process doing it alone. I would say it's one of the beauties of coaches in this world and even just people around you that can support you is sometimes it's easier to see things from the outside than when you're living in it. And so I would say you can do it on your own, but I would say it's definitely easier with someone there that's guiding you through that process.
And I think a lot of times when you're in your own head, you can't even see the elephant in the room.
For sure.
And you don't realize always the hypocrisy that's there. And if you're not sure about that, just go ask your spouse. They'll tell you.
Exactly.
Fastest, easiest, cheapest way to learn your elephants is to have that conversation. But you've got to be open to the feedback. And that's the other part of it. You have to be willing to listen. You have to be essentially coachable. Even if you're coaching yourself, you've got to be willing to examine the issues and go through it and deal with it.
Yeah.
Are there some daily routines that you've learned working with Tony that have helped you to live a better life?
Yeah, I would say I have a pretty specific morning routine, something that I do every single day. It's a must in my life, I guess you could call it. And it's two different things that I practice that I've learned from Tony. And one of them is an exercise called priming, which you may be familiar with, Rocky. And it's basically you do these breathing exercises. You think of three things you're grateful for. You also think of the energy in your body, and then you send love to three people around you, and then you visualize three things you want to create in your life. And so that's about a 10-minute process. I do that every morning. And then after, I'll go ahead and write down 10 things I'm grateful for. 5 are things that are already in my life. And then 5 are things that I want to manifest in my life, but I write them in the present tense as if I've already created them. And then I say a quick prayer. And that is something that I've just learned that it just centers me at this point. And regardless of if I'm in a different place in the country, if something's going on in my life, this always brings me back to just a place of centeredness where I can continue to create the life that I want.
And it's always good to start your day centered and relaxed and grateful versus I think a lot of people start their morning behind and rush off to wherever it is they have to go. And that starts a different chain reaction throughout their day, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think it helps keep you out of the reactionary mode rather than waking up like this. I've got to react to this, react to that. It allows you to be more in a creation space.
And that's always good. We always like to get people to take action. Do you have an action step that people could take this week to help them move forward in their life?
An action step to help people move forward in their life. I would say an action that you could take to move forward in your life is go have that conversation with the person that you've been putting off, whether that's someone very well and a father or a mother or a sibling that maybe you have some tension there and you've been putting off this conversation. Me in my life, I had a good relationship with my dad growing up, but it took eventually one day having a conversation where I was just crying to him because I wanted a better relationship, and it's brought in so many beautiful things to my life. So maybe it's a conversation like that you need to have, or maybe it's a conversation with someone you could potentially do business with that you've just been putting off. My action item would be whoever that person is that right now you've been putting off a conversation with, go have that conversation with them. Be authentic, be real, be open, be transparent, and watch what beautiful things will truly come from that.
It sounds so easy, but doing it is hard.
Yeah. And like you said, you got to put yourself in a place of vulnerability, in a place where you're just going to put yourself out there. But if you don't put yourself out there, nothing will happen. But you're guaranteeing failure if you don't do it. So you might as well just take the risk and you're not going to die from it.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone dying with the cause of death being they had a conversation. It just it doesn't show up on the autopsy reports. It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Writing down 10 things I'm grateful for every single morning.
So simple.
There's a lot of teachers that I've studied that ultimately they ask, what's the key to life? It always comes back to gratitude. Whether if you're pursuing a big goal in full circle, like what we talked about in the beginning, and thinking that when you get there, you're going to be happy. If you can't find happiness in the small little things, you're never going to find it in the big things. One of the biggest shifts I had is it's crazy because I don't even recognize this person today, but I used to look up books that were all about how to be happy because I wasn't happy for a portion of my life. And one of the biggest shifts I realized is someone told me this story of astronauts. They go to the moon and they accomplish this big thing and they come back and they're just depressed. Most astronauts are depressed when they get back because it's okay, what's next? And sort of the thing that I took away from that is it's like in your life, you got to be able to find happiness in a stranger's smile rather than only finding happiness when you do something like go to the moon. And by making that shift in my life, and by practicing gratitude every single day, that allows me to be grateful for the little things in life and also the big things in life, but ultimately bring more happiness into my life.
Same thing happens to Olympians, right? As soon as the games are over, they're like, they have nothing to strive for anymore. Yeah. So they have no purpose.
Yeah.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
That's a good question. Invest. I was in my young 20s and I made a good amount of money and I just spent it all on things that I called dumb things that didn't serve really any purpose in my life, but I just was making a lot of money and I was young and I just figured it's always going to come, and I spent a lot of it. Then eventually I lost all of it and didn't have any money once I left the business. So I think one thing that I wish I knew earlier is when you're making this money, continue to put some of it away.
And Tony even talks about that. You've got to automate your savings and let it go out of your business and out of your bank account, put it somewhere else, and then allow it to grow because the power of compounding is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's huge, especially if your age is a perspective. If you got years left in your life, compounding is.
If you look at Warren Buffett, I think he was like he was in his 50s when he had his first billion.
Right,
the only reason Warren's so rich today is because he's still alive. What is he, 90 something? You think about, he had all that money to begin with, and then he just allowed it to compound. This is what happens. Most of us don't have enough lifetime because we start too late. So starting early is extremely important.
Yeah.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
It would be that whatever idea you have of what you can do, that you can do it. I think there's this misconception that a lot of people have taken on in life that as you go from 18, you go into college and you graduate college, that you're supposed to do this thing that's safe. And there's this quote, I think it was Will Smith that said it. And he said, if you can fail at the thing you don't love, so you might as well try the thing that you do love. And I think I would tell that 18-year-old and build that belief in them that like whatever you think you would want to do that lights you up every single day, that you absolutely must follow that passion and that desire in your heart. Because if you follow it, you're persistent enough, eventually you can turn that into a life, and a life where you wake up every single day, where you're excited, you're joyful, you're waking up going, man, I can't believe this is the life I get to live. So that's what I would tell that person, because I think too many people slip into that trap of, I'm going to take the safe route, or this makes more sense logistically. And then they get 5, 10, 20 years down in their life and they go, damn, I got to wake up for another day of work. I got to go do this thing that I don't love. When the reality is there's so many opportunities in this world that you truly can create whatever you want. You just got to have the belief that you can.
Parents want to keep you safe. They don't necessarily want you to be successful. It's another one of those things that you have to learn. You've got to, and being young is one of the best ages to take risks, because you have so much more time to bounce back and less obligations. So it makes it a little easier.
Yeah.
If people would like to find you and connect and learn more about what you do, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest space that I'm really focused on right now is, I do a lot of work with Tony Robbins, and then I also have my own company, Finding Direction, and really a big focus we have there. And I love the last question you asked, especially because I work with a lot of people in that phase of figuring out what they want to do with their life. And so the biggest place I would say for people to go is if you're either in a place where you're not sure what you want to do with your life, or you have a kid who's maybe they're in their 20s, they're graduating from college, they're trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. We've put together a free resource, and it's called 3 Steps to Finding Direction in Under 10 Minutes. And anybody can go get it. It's at findingdirectionuniversity.com/3 steps. That's findingdirectionuniversity.com/3 steps. And it's basically a guide that in under 10 minutes, you can get an unbelievable amount of clarity on what it is you want to do with your life and how you can actually start executing and making that a reality.
And I will put a link to that in the show notes so that it makes it easy. Thank you so much for joining us today. I enjoyed the conversation with Stu. Clearly, where you focus your attention is where you get results. Being part of a mastermind, having a coach, can help you achieve that. It's helpful when someone is there to guide you through the struggle in the moment. Get rid of the friction. I love Stu's outlook on life and how he views it. It's taken time for him to make some pivots, and of course, he's faced storms. We all do. It's how we pivot through them and thrive that matters. Remember, happiness and gratitude happen on the journey. I do love Tony's priming exercise, and I do it occasionally, along with other morning meditations that I use. This week's action step: go have the conversation with the person you've been putting it off with. It always seems 10 times worse than you think. And most people find a massive load off their shoulders once they do it. Don't waste years holding on to it. Just get it done. It may not go the way you want, but at least you're no longer carrying it on your back. You get to move on. I put a link to Tony Robbins' programs in the show notes. If you want to check them out, do so. You may want to wait until they're back to live again, I think there's a certain difference between live and virtual. Next week, we have on Dr. Ed Adams. He's going to talk about reinventing masculinity, the liberating power of compassion and connection. In today's political climate, boys are being left behind, and that's not fair either. We won't see the results for another 20 plus years. If you enjoyed the episode, can you share it on social media? Tell me what you thought. Tag me. Let's get a conversation going. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.